The Dwell Design Leaders film series is brought to you by HP. The computer is personal again.
Well, I think the thing that co-housing is really trying to address is that we've become such an isolated society. We live closer and closer together, but we're less likely to know the people we live close to than ever before. And so we've really become a very isolated, fast-charging society. I was in college, and had always wanted to go to Europe, so I was sort of looking for a way to go to Europe, and I wanted to get into architecture school, so I was trying to figure out how to combine those two things. And I found this architecture program in Denmark. The Danes have always looked at housing more than individual houses and have a long, long history, going back to the 1860s with the doctors' housing, of how housing can affect people's health and how neighborhood affects health and how social elements are integrated into that. And so when you're studying architecture in Denmark, you study that history. We did a lot of tours of different types of housing. So as part of those tours, we visited co-housing communities. This was groups of people coming together and saying, can we create a better neighborhood? It comes from the ground up as opposed to a developer building something and say, why don't you buy in? The design itself is designed to encourage a sense of interaction and sense of community. It reminded me of the kind of neighborhoods I grew up in, where the kids were out playing and people knew everybody and there was just a social life in the street. When I saw it, it made so much sense. I figured everybody back in the States must already know about this. And it was when I got to UC Berkeley that I realized nobody knew about this. It was this little Danish secret. So we went back in 1984, spent a year there. We were associated with the Royal Academy of Architecture, but really we were working most closely with Jan Guðmund Højer, who's the granddaddy of co-housing. We visited more co-housing than any Dane had at that point. And we're just seeking as much information as we could about how people put this together. Our book originally came out in 1988 and made its way, literally handed by one person to another. You ought to read this across the country. And once you have people talking, the possibilities are endless. And I think that's one of the biggest thrills of working with co-housing groups, is to see that power. And you have people who are attracted by the community and other people who are really attracted by the possibility of living in a more sustainable way. And you put those two together and they become so much stronger than they could be individually. One of the really fun things is when you're working on a site plan with a co-housing group and they see, well, we could spread these houses out across the site and we don't have to attach these walls. But look what happens when we push them together. All of a sudden we've got room for a big community garden. And you know what? Our houses use less energy if we start sharing walls. And so when you get people involved in those designs, they really start to see the trade-offs in a way that very few non-designers have thought about. We're just creating the infrastructure. And like a village, it will grow and change over time. We're providing a living model, and it's a really good life. It's not about sacrifice, it's not about suffering. It's about living a better life in a more sustainable way.